Thanks for staying with us. So President Muhammadu Buhari recently announced that his administration planned to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within 10 years. Just like last Thursday, also, Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, also reiterated government's commitment at the media briefing to mark the 2019 World Poverty Eradication Day. How realistic are their plans? We have with us again the economy survey analyst, Mr. Roman Oseghale. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
You can call us on 07080668014. You can also tweet to us at TVC Connect. Please hashtag your TVC so we can read the tweet. Before we talk about lifting 100 million people out of poverty, I want us to go back to the issue of cuts in cost of governance. We talked about it earlier, and the president actually tried to present a case for reducing cost of governance by reducing the ESTA codes, ensuring that they reduce traveling, the number of people entourage that follow you when you travel. Now, these were nice. Everybody was happy about that. But my question to you, sir, is this enough? Which is what I think Obiajulu said earlier. Reducing the cost of travel, reducing even salaries of our lawmakers, is that enough to lift us out of poverty, number one, and to also get Nigeria on the positive from the deficit we currently have in our budget?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I think I said this last year on one of the interviews I had. We run an expense budget, not an investment budget, right? And that's when your expense supersedes your investments. That's the kind of economy we run. And once your expense supersedes your investments, you're getting poorer. And once your expense supersedes your investments and population increases, you're getting super poor. Now, what the government has done is a step in the right direction, because obviously that will help us reduce our budget deficits.
Right. Now,
our surplus of trade surplus rather, only comes from oil revenue. And anytime soon, if you look at the trends of things going on in the world now, all countries are changing to electric cars, right? I believe that at some point, oil is going to become coal. The way coal came and it was the hype, and at the end of the day, it became nothing. So we are in that anticipatory stage right now, when you look at figures, you look at trends, you look at things that are happening, and you start to make projections. Very soon, we're going to get to the reactive state, because global oil demand is going to be falling, right? And as it falls, the price is going to fall, right? Because there's going to be supply will outstrip demand. And as it falls, we're going to have a wider budget deficit if we do not diversify.
But people predicted we wouldn't get to that point until about 30 years, that we still have some time. I mean, based on some
before crisis happens, there are 3 stages. You have the anticipatory stage, where you start to anticipate. Probably maybe there's a disruptive innovation in the market. Now, if you don't take actions, it gets into the reactive stage. Reaction starts to happen. You see that the innovation is already disrupting the market. You're not selling, just like what happened to Kodak and Nokia, right? And then you enter the crisis situation. We are in the anticipatory state right now. The world governments are saying, look, in our monolithic economy, right? We're in the anticipatory state right now, because Europe is saying maybe by 2030 or 2040, they want to phase out. For the first time, in Canada, when I drive 3-4 hours in the past, I would see Tesla maybe 3-4 on the road. Oh. Now, I do the same 4 hours drive, and I can count as much as maybe 25, 30. You go to the massive malls now, all you see are charging points. Oil is going to fall, and as it falls, if we are not prepared for it, it's going to be a crisis for us.
Should we still stay on the pay cut? I just wanted to chip in, just a question. So I believe that we are treating the symptoms and not the root cause of the issue.
Yes.
Because for me, the cost of getting into power is something we cannot overlook. For someone who invests billions in campaigns and gets into power, will want to recoup that money back. It's investment. He has to put his interests first to settle the godfathers who have supported him. So if we don't look at it from that angle of getting into power, we can't get anywhere, because if I get there with so much money being spent, I have to recoup my money back. So what do you think that we can do aside from this pay cut? Because for me, it's just more like treating the symptoms. We're not looking at the originality of this problem.
I think government needs to do the same thing the US is doing. They look at your campaign funds, right? There's got to be policies that monitor campaign funds, right? Yeah. Now, when you look at those monies, those funds, where it's coming from, and you see that there are illicit funds or maybe it exceeds what is expected, right? Investigation needs to go in there. And second, I think the bane of this whole thing is that public service is too attractive. We need to make public service unattractive. There are people who want to serve, who really want to give to the country, are the people that will step forward and go into such places.
That's the real issue.
Let me go there. I want to say something, but let me just take that back. Now, 100 million people out of poverty. That's about 1 million people per year, if we're going to go by the 10 year that our president has projected.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, they've talked about diversification. They are going to agriculture. Now they've restricted 43 items from coming into the country, trying to force internal production, getting manufacturers to begin. It hasn't started, but these are all projections. In your view, as much as we agree that these are steps in the right direction, are there any drastic changes we must make to at least to begin to see the quick wins? Because we are thinking of 1 million people per year for the next 10 years. How realistic is this?
Look, I tell people, see, we make comparison with China. We make comparison with Singapore. I'll tell you a story. See, China did not open their markets, right? They didn't join the World Trade Organization, I think, until the 90s. They did not open their economy into a free market economy, I think, until 1978. They had to get it right before they did all those things, right? The border closure, you can, if you listen to what Colonel Ahmed Ali said, right, when he was briefing the lawmakers and how well they have been able to make progress. I am in full support of it, 150%, because it is yielding fruits. Now, on the aspect of manufacturing and producing things in-house, it's also a step in the right direction, because if you look at the 4 factors that constitute the assets of a country, which the World Bank had defined, which we discussed last week, produce goods. It's all about your infrastructure, your manufacturing, right? Now, that manufacturing part is what we need to get right. The same necessity is the mother of what? All invention. If we decide to close our borders, it will force us to think, it will force us to go back to the drawing table and do the right thing. Second, we compare Nigeria to Singapore. Did you know that in the time of Lee Kuan Yew, right, Forex, in fact, Forex was so restricted that it was only given to people who wanted, people and companies who wanted to bring in machineries for manufacturing. To the point that people, the society, the citizens of the country, right, they came together in union. They were so in agreement that when you see your neighbor smoking a foreign-made cigarette, you branded that neighbor like a traitor, somebody who was sabotaging the economy. Do you understand? Now, until we all, and why am I saying this? Until the North, East, West, South, we all come together and say, look, we need to make this thing work. It will not work.
Okay, so, and I agree with you that everything should trickle down, in that we should all take this journey together. Everybody must take ownership. We've said over and over again, smuggling is not a career. Don't make smuggling your job. Don't do it. It's spoiling our economy. However, when my National Assembly representative, the person representing me, is saying that he wants a particular imported brand and not a Nigerian brand, and the money is approved, and other than buying a local manufacturing, we have just one big company in Nigeria manufacturing cars locally, owned by Nigeria, and we now take our funds that we don't have enough of to pump into another country. Okay. It has, charity has to begin from home.
Let me address that. our consumer behavior, and I'll say this again, our consumer behavior is skewed towards foreignness. And that is one of the aspects we need to first of all address. We need to start appreciating our locally made things, because if we do not buy them, 200 million population is a huge market, right? And that huge market will only strive if we decide to patronize the locally made goods. It is not wrong to say, okay, well, we need to look outward sometimes to say, buy foreign-made goods. But those foreign-made goods should be termed under necessity, not wants. And until we do that, we might not be heading anywhere, because you look at the landscape, the manufacturing, we need to get competitive, right, to be able to break the market. And being competitive is patronizing the locally made goods.
Yes.
So let's just go back to the numbers again.
Yes.
10 million.
100 million.
I mean, 10 million a year.
Yes.
So we're looking at. And our president has also said, I mean, when he met with his newly formed economic team, talking about generating data locally, because he sort of does not, the data we get from outside our country does not truly reflect what it is that we're going through.
According to him.
So how do these foreign people get information, get this data that we seem unable to get? And how much should we trust that they have truly captured exactly what is happening in Nigeria? Do we truly have 100 billion? Or is it that when we now locally do this, we find that it's much less or even way more than what they're giving us?
Well, first of all, the foreign-made data, right, generated data, there are metrics that they use worldwide, and it's not just for Nigeria alone. And it is not 100% correct, but I'll tell you it's 99.9% correct, right? Now, looking at the data, when you look at your budget, for instance, I said this last week, that Nigeria's problem is a systematic problem. It's not an individual thing. Bill Gates said by 2040, Nigerian DRC is going to account for 40% of people living in extreme poverty, right? Now, between now and 2040, we're going to have 4 presidents. President Buhari is going to finish 2023. We're going to have other 2 presidents that are going to do 8 years each. Then we have the last president doing 1 year in office. So what is told you is that irrespective of who sits in Aso Rock, right, that this is what is going to happen. So it's a systematic thing. The system creates extreme poverty. And then when you look at it, if you go to let's look at slide 3, for instance, things that move people out of poverty. You find out that your education expenditure, for instance, right, is so abysmally low that these are the investments you actually need, right, to create wealth. In 1980, education expenditure was 3.16% of our total GDP. In 1981, it was 4.97%. By 1982, 4.89%.
I know we have the visuals as you're speaking. Hopefully we can get our viewers to see.
Slide 3. Now, but when you look at it, from 1986, we started reducing it, right? And by 1992, it had come to 0.78% of our GDP.
We're complaining about the results
Hold on. You're complaining now. You're looking at the effects of what happened 38 years ago. Slide 3, please. Now, we are now investing just 0.78%. Now, when I now compared Nigeria across the whole of Africa, I did North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and then the southern part of Africa. You will now find out that Nigeria invests the least in education. 0.78% as a percentage of budget. You look at countries like Cote d'Ivoire their average investment over 25 years was 4.23%. You look at countries like Ghana, 4.69%. Countries like Togo, 4.09%. Sierra Leone, 2.65%.
Can I pause you for a quick second? So let me, because this issue of education you mentioned. We understand what you said, that education obviously is important.
Yes.
But I was talking about quick wins. Education is a long-term investment where
Yes.
somebody goes to school for 4 years, 8 years, and you then begin to reap the benefits in future.
Yes.
But what Nigerians want to see
6, 3,
is
3,
what
4.
can happen now. What are those quick wins that the government can do that we can begin to see? Because we thought it was agriculture, but for whatever reason, it's not coming as far. Because IMF research, the IMF or World Bank was saying the GDP hasn't increased that much with agriculture. So the question is, sir, what can we do drastically where Nigerians can begin to see changes?
Okay. You have a 10-story building.
Yeah.
Right? You can bring it down in 1 hour. But you want to build that 10-story building?
Build it in 1 hour.
One block at a time.
Maybe 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years,
One
right?
block at a time.
Now, this is the way it works in economics, right? Whatever you're seeing now, right, did not start today. It did not start yesterday. Now, I just said something to you. The education expenditure started going down from 1986, and it reached 0.78% in 1992. And for some curiosity, it has stayed at 0.78%. It doesn't exceed 1% of our total. So that, for me, it's a question mark, right? Now, what you're seeing today is the destruction that happened, that started from 1986. What Nigeria needs to do is this. We know that we have this infrastructure and investment in human capital deficit. We need to increase it, maybe 5-10 folds, right? Now, let me finish this, right? You look at, I think in 2018 or 2018, our education expenditure was 2.1 billion. Population was 198 million people. Yet, in 1980, our education expenditure was 2.086 billion, population 73 million. Now, in the adjusted net savings on how to create wealth for a country, the formula, as I said last week, was adjusted net savings equals net national adjusted net savings equals net savings. That's what you already have, plus education expenditure, minus energy depletion, minus mineral resource depletion, minus net forest depletion, minus damages from carbon dioxide emission, and then minus damages from particulate emissions. If your ANS, that's adjusted net savings for short, if your ANS is in the positive, that means you're creating wealth. But if it's in the negative, that means you're losing wealth and you're getting poorer. So that education investment is very, very critical for national and economic growth. And it also has a social benefit that we are not even looking at all.
There's no quick fix.
There's no quick, the truth is this, there is no quick fix.
Okay, fantastic. Let me go on a break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation with our guests. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back. Welcome back to Your View.
Thanks for staying with us. So going back to this issue of lifting 10 million people out of poverty for the next 10 years, the government have tried to initiate various initiatives, like they'll say schools acquisition, bead making, baking. What's that one they do? Kakena pep. The other one, soap making. These are initiatives. Yeah. Now, how sustainable are these? Or are these the kind of the skills acquisition we really need to move this economy forward?
Well, first of all, a lot of people have lost school years that were not even at school, right? Now, if you go to the Western world, if your child is not in school and the social services finds out, your neighbor could even report you, they come and take that child away from you. Do you know why? And they take that child and put that child in a foster home. Do you know why? See, there's a template, right, which the Western world has, and it calculates if you do not go to school, the problem you bring to your society, the economic loss. So there's an economic loss for every child not being in school. For instance, when you look at the benefits alone, if a person goes to school, if you are as a graduate, there's every tendency that your children are going to be graduates, right? Mm-hmm. Good. If you go to school, there's every tendency that you have a stable home. Mm-hmm. If you go to school, there's every tendency that you pay tax. But if you do not, all those things are reversed, right? There's an economic loss from taxation. That means that that person may not be able to pay the normal tax that they're supposed to pay in their lifetime, which is
calculated.
Yeah, it's calculated. Let me finish. Then the second thing is this: that person, maybe a man or a woman, could be in and out of jail, right? It could become some nuisance to the society. So they know that, look, if we put this child in school and we decide to invest maybe $200,000 until that child leaves secondary school, that is the universal basic education, which every government owes everyone, right? Now, this child, for the next 45 years, before they retire at 65, may be able to earn $40,000 a year. By the time they calculate that tax, which they will take back, they will have been maybe in that 45 years been able to make maybe $500,000 to $750,000 from that child. So that's why they say education is an investment. It's not an expense.
Let me take this call. Thanks for calling. Are you there?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Well done to everything you guys are doing. I have a contribution.
Yes, go ahead, please, Vivian.
My contribution is, yes, education is an investment. So for us to invest in Nigeria, we have to invest in year 2023 for the next election. Whomever we are picking has to be someone from within us, not people that have to go to abroad every day, be it education, and the children are in abroad, and you're going there as a public servant.
Hello, Vivian. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Very valid points.
Yeah, so we've said over time that the problem of Nigeria is our systems that are really not working. Yes. And I'm glad that the president has a dream of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. But I would like to know the model, the economic model he wants to use to achieve this, knowing that when they started giving this trader money to market women, you give them 10,000 naira to do business, and then they come back. When they get home, there's no good road to convey their business. There is no power to sustain themselves. The basic amenities are not there, and so they would, at the end of the day, not spend that money to run that business because they need to feed. So how do we position our system in such a way that as we are working towards the goal of lifting Nigerians out of poverty, everything will be balanced?
To solve a problem, first of all, you need to understand how things work. If you don't understand how things work, you only be, you go around in circles, right? Now, the World Bank put forward a template on how to reduce extreme poverty. And if we seem to be going ahead of that template, right? It's just like bringing a maths formula now. You bring two maths equations, and one has to be solved with board mass. If you decide to not use that board mass, you will get it wrong. But it's not that you did not add addition, subtraction, division, right? But you need to use board mass to solve it. And that's what the World Bank did. They brought out the ANS, and they said, look, the wealth of countries, assets of countries are divided into 4 broad categories: produced assets, natural assets, the human capital assets, and then your net foreign assets. You need to sit down, have think tanks on how to manage that, those portfolio investment. I'll give you some figures. In 2016, right, our population growth was at 2.7%. We added 4.892 million to population, right? Now, but escape rate for extreme poverty was 12.7 people per minute. That means that we added 6.675 million people to extreme poverty, right? Now, for us not to add those people to extreme poverty, we needed to generate $4.872 billion in return from those assets management, right? Now, but for those people that went into extreme poverty, we had 4.629 billion in deficit. So you need to understand the dynamics of how it works, right? If you want to lift, for instance, the 100 million we want to lift out, if we say, okay, we want to do 10 million every year, is it the existing or the existing plus the population growth? So, do you understand? Now, that is what I have done for the next 10 years is to calculate how much we need per year for both the population growth, not to go into extreme poverty.
I'd like to figures in a minute. Let me take this call from Adamu. Adamu, are you there? Hello, Adamu. Hope I've not lost that call. Adamu, are you there? From Yobe.
Yes, I'm there.
Thanks for calling. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning. I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, hello?
We are sugar. I'd like you to get to those figures because what you projected, 10 million. Let me see. Let me hear those figures, please.
See, you can lift 10 million people out of poverty every year. You look at countries like Afghanistan. You look at countries like Pakistan, right? What they did was to sit down and manage their broad portfolio investments. Now, as we demonstrated last week, right? As you decrease your natural assets, right? Now, our crude oil, we deplete it to the tune of 2.2 million barrels every day, right? We're only converting it to current assets. We're not creating wealth.
Yeah.
So we're basically getting poorer as we deplete the mineral resource asset. Now, but what do you do? What do you do with that money determines whether you get richer or you get poorer. And what the World Bank has said is invest 26% in education. But if you look at our investment over the years, we've only averaged 7%, 7 to 8% investment in education. So you don't expect when the think tanks, when the experts tell you put 26% and you're putting 7% and you expect a miracle to happen, right? It's not going to happen. Then to now do that 10 million every year, we need to attack it from the grassroots, from local government to state and then the federal. The government needs to sit down and say, look, local government, this is your responsibility. State government, this is your responsibility. And then the federal will also do this. Now, for instance, trees. Pakistan, as I said last week, planted 1 billion trees. They planted 1 billion trees, costing them $160 million. Now, by the time those trees grow up in 5 years and you reevaluate that asset, it will give you as much as 250 to 300 billion in return in assets. Your assets have been shored up, right? As I said last week, you need to understand the concept of the balance sheet to understand what I was saying. Those 4 factors, those 4 broad portfolio investments are what makes up your asset base for the country. And it is your assets that basically determines your net worth. You understand? Your balance sheet, that determines your net worth, right? So if we are able to shore up other aspects of our assets as we deplete our oil, right? We will be using those other ones to cover the depletion, which at the end of the day gives us a better return.
So let's bring the... I want to simplify this.
Because in simplifying what she just said was, we are depleting, our oil is not renewable.
Good.
The trees are renewable.
Good.
So when we deplete oil that is not renewable, let's invest some of it into building, planting trees, which is renewable.
Good.
So we still find a way to balance our natural assets at long term. Let's go to education, sir. Because when you say education, it's a bit broad. We've lost a generation already.
Definitely.
A lot of people that couldn't afford private education when we had the privilege of having parents that could take us into private primary schools and secondary schools. Yes. And they are now constituting a bit of, the crisis we have in the society. How do we educate them? Because we can't leave them behind. They will still become a problem for us while we are also investing into the grassroots secondary school, primary school education system. How do we capture the 16 to 25-year-olds that are uneducated or they've gone through secondary school but don't have the skills to make them add value to our society?
Good question. Now, I think what the government needs to do is this. That generation has lost out when it comes to the knowledge economy, right? What we need to do is get them back in a way that we can offer them skill acquisitions for free. And we also can set up evening schools. Now, my proposal is this. the schools, the public schools run from 8 to 2 p.m. every day, right? The government can offer these kids evening classes. Maybe two hours of evening classes every day, right? Free. And everything has to be free, because if you tell them to come and pay, they're not going to come, right?
Now, I want to pause you for a quick second, because that was what I was trying to ask earlier. Yeah. When government try to do this, they'll say, come and learn baking, come and learn soap making, come and learn how to drive Okada. Is that what we need?
Well, can you permit me to answer this question? Because I'm a business person and I understand the problem in that. So you can empower people with skills, but if they don't have an industry to feed into, we are being micro-entrepreneurs. We have so many micro-entrepreneurs where if the government provides an incubation system where you train the bakers and you put them right into a massive bakery and they are earning money immediately with that skill, what you have done is turn them from no skill into bakers, into earning money with the skill, and then you are benefiting the country at large. But we have micro bakers, micro tailors, micro everything that they don't have enough money to even feed themselves or pay taxes. So it's not a quick fix problem. We need to be more holistic in how we're doing the skill empowerment we're doing currently right now. That's what I foresee based on what I've experienced.
Your view is very good, right? Now, you see, when you teach people, one of the things that was also missing from our educational system is that we were not teaching people on how to become entrepreneurs.
At all.
Right? Now, if you're teaching these kids to come learn some handwork skills and stuff, if we go back and say, look, we offer them 2-3 hours every day in the evening to come do some book work, right? At least let them learn how to read and write. Let them learn how to balance their books. Let them learn how to save, right? Yes. We teach them the basics on how to manage their businesses. Yeah, that will go a long way. Those evening classes, I think, is a compulsory for that generation that has been left out of school.
There's also the other side where a lot of people are saying people are going through schools, going to schools and do not even have the skills to help them get jobs or do proper work at the curriculum work. So even going to school is not enough. Yeah, school does not seem to be equipping them for real life.
Well, our curriculum, there was a time I also talked about the curriculum of the country, right? See, curriculums are tailored to suit whatever time you're in history.
Yes.
The curriculum we were running in the 60s, 70s, they still brought it to the 80s, they brought it to the 90s, right? For instance, now, you're looking at AI. AI is something that's going to come disrupt the market. Now, when you go to places like Rwanda, you go to places like Kenya, right? They've already started planning ahead in their curriculums for those disruption. Now, and we're still running the same old curriculums of the 80s. I teach you English, I teach you math, you know. And then, second, our educational system does not teach people how to think.
Critically, thank you, sir.
There's no critical thinking in the system, right? There's no critical thinking in the system. Now, I went to school, I did an executive MBA, and in 2 years, we handled real life cases, about 600. 600, almost 600 cases, right, that we handled in those 2 years. And it would teach you. I remember I sat down in class. There was a day I sat down in class, you know, on the lighthouse side. And I was so confused. And I asked myself, I said, Roman, who sent you message? You understand? You know, it was so intense, right? But you see, at some point, my brain opened up. Do you understand? And when it opened up, I could see things from broader perspectives.
We have to run up very soon. I wanted to talk about the issue of the emissions.
Yes.
The fact that those factors that cause poverty. Could you share a few?
Part of, when you look at the formula, right, it says your net savings plus education expenditure minus energy depletion minus net forest depletion minus carbon dioxide emissions and then minus particulate emissions. Now, the carbon dioxide we do not look at. Now, if you look at one of the slides I put up there that says the cost of CO2 damages, right? They deduct all these things from your balance sheet every year to calculate the net worth of the country. In 2014, we lost 2.8 billion to carbon dioxide emission. 2015, 2.79 billion, 2016, 2.6 billion, 2017, 2.66 billion. Now, by the time you add that to also particulate emissions, right? Now, you now find out that the particulate emissions is even higher. In 2014, particulate emissions was 9 billion. 2015, 8.1 billion. 2016, 6.9 billion. 2017, 6.2 billion. Now, what people don't understand is this. You see the dust you see, right? It's causing you to get poor.
Because you get sick.
Yeah, you get sick. It's not just that. Now, when you go abroad, try this. Take your phone. Take a picture.
It's different.
It's clearer, right? But by the time you come back here, you use the same camera or phone, it looks hazy.
Yes.
Now, what your eyes can't catch, your phone catches them. You understand? Those micro particles, they cause you to become sick. Now, if you look at the CO2 emissions, it causes acid rain, right? Acid rain has its effect. CO2 makes you sick. Then you are now cutting down trees that is supposed to lower these things. Our forest has been depleted to over 100.
So we're killing ourselves.
Good. So you see, these things have ripple and multiplier effect. As you're cutting down your forest, Nigeria's forest reserve, right? As we will see. Just hold on, please. Let me address that part.
Nigeria is a bad business.
No, we're not a bad business. We just need to understand the dynamics of how things work.
Knowledge.
Now, what I am proposing to the government is, when you look at these factors, the factors, obviously, they have sub-factors, the KPIs. We've developed key performance indexes, right, which we will measure. If your net forest is increasing, you know that your carbon dioxide emission is going to reduce. The country is going to save money from that. You know that your particulate emission is going to reduce. You're going to save money from that, right? So if you look at our net forest, I think in 1990, we had a net forest that was 18.9%, the total area of Nigeria. Today, it is just 7.2%. And the UN regulation says minimum of 12%. This is what Pakistan has done. War-torn Afghanistan that is wiping out extreme poverty. So you look at those countries, they're not richer than Nigeria. They don't have the mineral resources. So when I started doing the research, it got me concerned that what were they doing? Pakistan planted 1 billion trees. Afghanistan planted trees. The other day, Kenya planted 350 million trees.
We planted some trees too.
You would think they are easy. They are not easy, right? These are not easiest things. But they know, they've been able to study the multiplier effect. Philippines has even passed a policy.
We have to round up. So in summary, what we need, obviously, investment in education.
We need massive investment in
education, and also massive tree planting.
We need to plant, we need the renewable assets. As we deplete these assets, we need to start shoring up other assets.
Other assets we can show up, aside from trees?
Our net foreign assets. The president is already doing that. He met it at 30, is now 45, right? Okay. Our produced assets, which are infrastructure, manufacturing, and then the pastoral land, your farmland also comes under natural assets. So all those are also being calculated. You know, there's rice planting and all that stuff right now.
So we're building foreign exchange, but we're depleting by borrowing money. I don't understand.
What do you mean?
We are building our foreign assets.
Yes.
We're borrowing money to fund the economy.
As I said last week, borrowing debt is not bad. It is what you do with the debt that determines whether it's good or bad.
I have to run up. I don't want to wait for this question.
I just wanted to ask one very short question.
Yes,
now, we know our government does not work in continuum.
Yes.
So after this plan of lifting 100 million people out of poverty, the next government comes up and throws it out.
To lift the 100 million people out of poverty, it's only possible if you understand the dynamics of how things work. And that dynamics, you need to sit down, understand these assets, which the World Bank has put out, the key performance index, and then know what your population growth is, because they use all those things to calculate them.
So every government coming in has to tap into it.
Good. That is what we have developed.
Unfortunately, we have to round up. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Oseghale, for sharing your knowledge with us. Just hope that government is listening And they can hopefully invite you to have a proper conversation
Honestly.
with the economic team, because they just reconstituted a new economic team. So we obviously need a lot of work. Now that we have an opportunity to change things.
Before we become reactive.
Yes. That's all we can take on today's show. I hope you've learned a few things. Tomorrow is another day. Have a fabulous day. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.